There must be a lineup at the door.
Yeah, I see 53 participants have joined so far, so that's great.
Fantastic. So I think with that many participants in, I think we'll get started. Just want to welcome everybody to this evening. Thank you so much for coming to our information session on secondary English. My name is Brent Smith. I'm a central principal in programming and learning, and one of my portfolios is literacy from kindergarten to 12. So I've got I get to work with some really fine folks, and I've got a couple of those fine folks here tonight. I'd like to introduce Christine Court. She's our board-based literacy coach, got tons of experience at the K-8 spectrum, and she works really closely with Zan Woods. And Zan's who you're going to be hearing from tonight. Zan is our secondary literacy coach. But again, we work really as a K-12 team, really looking at best practices in literacy across the grades. So again, welcome to the presentation tonight. I'm going to mute, and you're here to hear Zan tonight. So really looking forward to this presentation. And again, thanks for joining us.
Thanks everyone for joining. I'm just going to share my screen here. All right, everybody can see that. So welcome to the All About High School Grade 9 English presentation. My name is Alexandra Woods, and I'm the literacy instructional coach, as Brent mentioned, for secondary with Christine Court and the rest of the team at PAL. This presentation tonight is going to go over the course description for Grade 9 English and overall curriculum strands and activities, discuss the Indigenous Equity and Human Roadmap and its impact on English classrooms within the OCDSB, and then also provide some recommendations for how to prepare your student for Grade 9 English. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll have a few moments for questions after the presentation. So the Grade 9 English course is designed to support students to develop oral communication, reading, writing, and media studies. And this course really prepares students for English at the grade 10, 11, and 12 level. And you'll notice that the grade 9 English course, like other courses, has a course code. And so if you can see on the screen here at the top right of the screen, the code consists of letters and numbers and can be found on your student's timetable. So the letters at the beginning of the code indicate the subject. So this one is English, so ENG. The number after the letters indicate the year the course is to be taken. So 1 indicates, indicates grade 9. Move this over here. 2 indicates grade 10, 3 indicates grade 11, and 4 indicates grade 12. And the letter at the end indicates the level. Okay, just want to make sure, can everybody see the screen? Screen is working, Brent?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, excellent. So each course also has curriculum that teachers must follow when developing course content and designing instruction. So each course curriculum has strands. So the strands you can see as the first row there. And the strands are really overarching categories that students will be exploring, and specific expectations for the strands fall underneath. And you can see the specific expectations here. So for example, students are expected to learn about oral communication in grade 9 English, and specifically, they're expected to learn how to listen to understand, how to speak to communicate, and how to reflect on their oral communication skills. So this just gives you an understanding of how the curriculum is organized and those 4 overall strands that teachers will be focusing on. So let's take a closer look at the oral communication strand. So by the end of the course, students are expected to listen to understand, and that's listening in order to understand appropriately in a variety of situations for purposes, speaking to communicate, so using speaking skills and strategies for different audiences and purposes, and reflecting on skills and strategies. And so that's identifying their strengths as listeners and speakers and things that they might need to improve on, or areas for improvement. So oral communication is taught and practice through a variety of classroom activities, including listening to podcasts or oral texts, engaging in small and larger group discussions, and also through presentations. And so the image on the right, this image right here, is an image of a conversation was developed by one teacher in the OCD, and the conversation game asks students to use sentence stems in order to engage in conversation with their peers and to learn really how to listen actively and respectfully and to respond in a variety of ways. So this is one example of how oral communication is organized and practiced in the classroom, the OCDSB. The second strand in the curriculum is called reading and literature studies. And so by the end of the course, students are expected to read for meaning. So reading and demonstrating an understanding of a variety of different texts to understand form and style. And so that is really recognizing a variety of different text forms and structures and stylistic elements to read with fluency. And also, again, to reflect on the skills and strategies. So how are they doing in understanding texts and in understanding and reading for meaning. So the reflective piece is also part of the curriculum and very important. So students might read whole class texts, or they might read independently, and students are exposed to a variety of texts, including narrative, informational, and multimedia texts. And so here are some of the texts that students are reading this semester in grade 9 classrooms in the OCDSB. And you'll notice that reflect multiple identities and genres, and really having text that reflects student identity and interest is a priority for many teachers across the board. And the picture on the right down here is actually the teacher who teaches with the OCDSB who want to purchase an enormous amount of texts for her classroom based on student interests, and one of 50 winners across North America. So here are some of the ways that teachers are supporting students to meet the expectations of reading for meaning and understanding form and style. So these again are pictures from teachers who are teaching this semester in grade 9. So this forward a picture I took last week of a teacher who's teaching the annotation process, which is the process of noticing what a writer is doing, thinking about the stylistic element, and then writing and responding next to the text to and learning. So this is one way that teachers are helping students to understand meaning and really activate that critical thought when they're exposed to different forms of text. The third strand in the English curriculum is writing. And so by the end of the course, students are expected to develop and organize their writing, to use their knowledge of text structure and stylistic elements to revise their text, to apply their knowledge of grammar, spelling, and punctuation, and again, to reflect on their strengths as writers and on what they need to do to improve. So some teachers are using in the OCDSB to support students to develop their writing. And this shows a class who are engaging in something called a peer editing protocol, using a script. And this protocol allows what I'm dealing with as a writer, and then to get feedback from their peers in a really safe and productive way. So the fourth and final strand in the English curriculum is the new strand. Core students are expected to understand a variety of media texts, including images, advertisements, films, social media, understand the forms and conventions of media techniques, create media texts, and again, skills and strategies as interpreters and creators of media. And so again, another photo that was taken a couple of weeks ago from a classroom in the OCDSB. And this is a grade 9 classroom, and it shows an example of really critical literacy, critical media literacy. And so for this activity, students were asked to turn on their notifications, very brave teacher. Track how many notifications they received over a 75-minute period. And then the results were used to discuss media consumption and the impact on actions, beliefs, and self-esteem. So what's really beautiful about this example of critical interpretation of media is that the teacher's embedding numeracy and understanding of math within their practice. So the cross-curricular is going strong in the OCDSB, and there's lots of teachers who are contributing and collaborating with others in order to create meaningful and engaging lessons. In addition to the Ontario curriculum, teachers in the OCDSB are guided by the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap. And this is a document that was created by the board to really guide instruction that's based on human rights, equality, non-discrimination, participation and inclusion, and transparency and accountability. And it was also very much based on voices from students and community members and families to make sure that the OCDSB was accountable to representing and reflecting experiences and voices. So one of the areas of the roadmap of teacher instruction, so in addition to the curriculum that I mentioned, is the programming and support for students section. And this section outlines programming goals, including the redevelopment of courses to include and represent histories, perspectives, and ways of knowing, and increased representation in the curriculum. And so the Indigenous Human Rights and Equity Roadmap is a guide for text selection, instructional decision. I'd show some of the lessons and student work that reflects that roadmap. So how can you prepare your child for grade 9 English? So one very important way to prepare your child for grade 9 English is to encourage them to read daily. We know that 20 minutes of reading a day means exposure to 1.8 million words per year, but it also helps equip students with knowledge of the world and themselves. So books are both windows and mirrors, and they can help students to see outside of themselves and also help them to reflect on their own evolving identities. And really the classroom should be a space for students to be able to explore their identities. So reading doesn't always have to be in text form. There are many podcasts and audiobooks available for free through the public library and also through past. One of the most popular podcasts that students have been listening to this year is called Serial, and it's available through NPR online. A second way to help your child practice English through dinner time conversations. And this might sound silly, but I've been practicing this with my kids at home. I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. And so just using simple sentence stems and encouraging my kids to do the same at dinner time when we're having conversations about things, topics of interest to students. So providing them with the language, I noticed that, I wonder whether, or in my opinion, this is because, and then them to do the same, or just engaging in kind of that conversation with that modeling of using these sentence stems can really actually support students with their writing and with their reading comprehension, with all those pieces. So this quote that reading and writing float on the top is really that idea that we can actually teach sentence structure and how to speak through dinner time conversations and engaging with our kids and our children orally. Okay, so finally, the last strategy, really looking at how studies show that daily writing, so the pen to paper writing, helps students process concepts and engage in writing activities that put pen to paper, some real literacy, real world acts of literacy, so writing to a city councillor, sending a friend another city or country a letter, supporting those types of things can be really, really helpful. So I encourage you to buy them a journal and encourage them to make it their own and just engage in some acts of literacy that difference in their world and that matter to them to engage this. So these are some other images from classrooms. And that wraps up the OCDSB all about high school English presentation.
Dan,
so if you have any questions, please feel free to post them and we'll, go.
Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say, we have a question in the chat from DR about what does the level mean? So for example, D versus another letter.
Yep. So, so at the moment, actually, grade 9 English is D-streamed, which means that there are no levels. And so next year, grade 10 as well. But in grade 11 and 12, students might choose that they want to continue towards university or to college. So D stands for academic and the P stands for applied. But this year and next year, no classes in grade 10 or grade 11 or grade 9 or 10 English. So that decision or that choice about whether or not to continue with the university level path would happen in grade 11 or grade 12. Oops. Are there any other questions?
I think, Zan, what I'm going to say, because I think our time is up for this, so I'm going to just note to folks that if you do have questions, you can email the OCDSB at their email address and just ask your question, and it will get to our department if you do have any questions around secondary English. So again, thank you so much. I hope the next session that I think is just starting now or almost about to start is an excellent one. But again, thank you very much for joining us for this information session tonight. And I hope you have an excellent night at the other sessions. Take care. Now, Saeed, can I ask a technical question right now? Oh, maybe we don't have tech support. Okay. If you could, my question actually, maybe Zan, you know the answer to it is, are we just starting up again at 7? Like, do we start right now again, assuming like there's a flow of folks in and out?
That's correct.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, okay.
So, okay, that's good. So we'll just follow that cycle. So all the folks who are waiting right now are hearing this great conversation, which is just fine. Zan, if you, so to the folks just joining us now, and I see we've got about 25 people in the room. I just really want to thank you for joining us. We've got about a 15-minute presentation. I'm gonna be really quick here because I know we're running just a little bit late, but I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Brent Smith, very proud principal at 133. I work centrally, and one of my portfolios is K-12 English and literacy. So I get to look at everything from our literacy and our youngest learners hitting kindergarten for the first time all the way to grade 12, and I get to work with some pretty great people. Tonight we've got Christine Court. She's our board-based literacy coach. And we've got Zan Woods, and she's who you want to hear from tonight. Zan's our secondary literacy coach, and she's got just a great presentation for you. So again, thank you very much. If you have questions, we will absolutely take them in the chat and enjoy the presentation.
Oh, I was unmuted all the time. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. As Brent mentioned, my name is Alexandra Woods, and I am a literacy instructional coach with the OCDSB, and my specific role focuses on secondary literacy. Just going to share my screen here. Oops, not that one. There we go. So this presentation is going to go fairly quickly, and I'm going to go over a course description for grade 9 English and overall purposes. And then I'm going to give a brief introduction to the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap and its impact on English classrooms within the OCDSB. And then I'm going to provide some recommendations for how to prepare your student for grade 9 English. So the grade 9 English course is really designed to support students to develop 4 overall areas. So oral communication, reading, writing for English at the grade 10, 11, and 12 levels. And you'll notice that the grade 9 English course, like other courses, has a course code. You can see on the right-hand side of the screen. The code consists of letters and numbers and can be found on your student's timetable. And the letters at the beginning of the code indicate the subject. So anytime you're looking at your child, you're not sure what the courses are, if you can Google it, or you can look at the first 3 letters, and ing indicates English. The number afterwards indicates the year. So 1 indicates grade 9. If it's a 2 there, that indicates the second year of high school, which is 10, 3, grade 11, etc. And the letter on the end indicates the level of the course. So each course also has curriculum, and curriculum are expectations that are outlined by the Ministry of Education that course teachers adhere to. And so each course curriculum has strands, and you'll notice the strands are indicated right here for English, and then also expectations that fall beneath strands. So the strands are like the kind of overarching umbrellas of the specific expectations that students are expected to meet by the end of the course. For example, students in English are expected to learn about oral communication. That's the first strand. And specifically, there are expectations beneath that. So listening to understand, they're expected to speak, to communicate, and really to reflect on their skills and strategies. So the strands, again, are indicated above, and the specific expectations below. So I'd like to take a closer look at oral communication. So at the end of grade 9, students are expected to listen to understand and respond in appropriate ways for a variety of purposes, speaking skills and strategies for different audiences and purposes. And then also the most important thing, in my opinion, is really reflecting on their skills and strategies and how are they growing, and really being as oral communicators. So oral communication is taught and practiced through a variety of classroom activities, including listening to podcasts and oral texts, engaging in small and larger group discussion. Image on the right here, I wanted to highlight this. This is a conversation game that a teacher from the OCDSB developed, and really to support students to learn accountable talk and to listen and respond actively and responsively to partners. And so in this activity, students use sentence stems to respond to a prompt. And so they'd be engaging in discussions and saying, in my opinion, I feel that. So this is just one resource and one way of practicing oral communication in the classroom that's happening. So the second strand of the curriculum is reading and literature studies. And so by the end of the course, students are expected to read for meaning, so really understanding a variety of different types of texts, including graphic texts and novels, understanding form and style, which is really how the text is organized, and different stylistic elements and how that might reflect a specific genre, to read with fluency, so using knowledge of words in order to read fluently, and then again, reflecting on their skills and strategies as what's working for them, what's not. What are their areas of strengths and areas for improvement? So within reading and literature studies, some students might read whole class texts with their teachers, or they might read independently and get to choose their texts. And they're really to a variety of texts, including narrative, informational, persuasive, and multimodal texts. So here are actually some examples of texts that students are reading in the grade 9 classroom this semester. You'll notice that the texts really reflect multiple identities and genres, and really having text that reflects student identity and interest is a priority for many teachers in the OCDSB. The teacher on the right here applied for a grant from an organization, received a bunch of money to purchase additional texts for her students, and they were all based on student interest. So the teachers are very keen to make sure that the texts are reflective of student voice and identity. So some of the ways that teachers are supporting students to meet the expectation of the reading and literature studies strand are by using some strategies such as text annotation. So this that many teachers in the OCDSB are using. And so this is actually a picture from a classroom. A teacher is using the annotation process, this idea of noticing what a writer is doing and thinking, making their thinking visible by writing beside the text. So think about what an author is doing in terms of voices, and then reflecting how that impacts the meaning and purpose of the text. The third strand of the English curriculum is writing. And so by the end of the course, students are expected to develop and organize their writing, to use their knowledge of text structure and stylistic elements, to apply knowledge of grammar, spelling, and punctuation, and to reflect on their strengths as writers and on what they need to do. So again, that reflective piece. Actually show one strategy that teachers are using, again, this semester in the grade 9 class to support students to develop their the picture above shows a class engaged for editing protocol, and this peer editing protocol uses a script, and the script gives students these sentence stems in order to be able to communicate thoughtfully and reflectively, to give feedback as modeling for their own work. So it's really a collaborative practice where students are learning from one another. So the fourth and final strand in English curriculum is the media strand. So by the end of the course, students are expected to understand a variety of media texts, to understand the forms and the conventions and the techniques of media, and also to create media texts, and then again to reflect on their skills and strategies as interpreters and creators of media. So again, I think that last overall expectation in all the strands is really that reflective process of learner, whereas I still need to work on. And so that's reflected again in the media studies. And this photo, these photos were taken last week in a grade 9 in the OCDSB. It's an example of critical literacy. And so students were asked to actually turn on their notifications and track how many notifications they received in a 75-minute period. This teacher is, to do that. Media consumption and the impact on actions, beliefs, and self-esteem. And so one of the things we notice here is that news, as an example, has zeros, and no students had any news. But the other really beautiful thing about this lesson and this approach to exploring media is it's not only engaging students in critical thinking, but it's also embedding cross-curricular literacy work into their English studies. So lots of incredible collaborators in the board, English teachers and other teachers who are really looking to provide an engaging experience for students. In the Ontario curriculum, teachers in the OCDSB are guided by the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap. And this is a document that is created by the OCDSB and really guides our instruction. And it's based on human rights, equality and non-discrimination, participation and inclusion, and transparency and accountability. And also was created based on the voices of students, community members, parents. So one of the areas of the roadmap that guides teacher instruction is the programming and support for students section. This section outlines program goals, including the redevelopment of courses to include and represent Indigenous, Black, and minoritized histories, perspectives, and ways of knowing, and also increase representation in the curriculum. So the Indigenous Human Rights and Equity Roadmap is really a guide for text selection, for instructional decisions and planning. And this slide shows some of the lessons work that reflects the map, so you can see. So how can I prepare my child for grade 9 English? child for grade 9 English is to encourage them to read daily. So 20 minutes of reading a day means exposure to 1.8 million words per year. But it really also equips students knowledge about the world and themselves. So books are both windows and mirrors, and they can help students see outside of themselves, but they can also help them to reflect on their own evolving identities. And so reading need to be in text form either. There are many podcasts and audiobooks available online or for free through the public library or through podcast applications. And one of the most popular podcasts among high school students lately is called Serial, and it's available for free online. A second way to help your child prepare for high school English is through dinner time conversations. And I'm not sure if you've heard the quote that reading and writing float on a sea of talk. But you can use this time to have a child about interest that sentences like, I noticed that, I wonder whether, in my opinion. So all of those sentence stems actually help them embed the knowledge of those sentences into their minds, and then they're able to communicate those through written work as well, which is something that I also do with my kids at home. And then finally, studies show that writing, so the pen to paper writing helps students process and map meanings. So really encouraging your child to engage in writing activities that put pen to paper, and these real world acts of literacy are especially useful as they provide agency and empower them to use literacy to change the world. So examples of this might be writing to a city councillor, an MPP or MP, sending letters to a friend who lives in other cities, or supporting younger siblings with reading and writing. And a fun writing is to buy them a journal and really encourage them to make it their own and document their thoughts through words and images. So this wraps up the OCDSB's All About High School English presentation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat if we have a few minutes, and we'll be able to respond to as many as we can. Leave the next presentation. Brent, do you know what time the next presentation begins at?
Yeah, I was just looking at the schedule right now. So the next presentation starts at 8 o'clock. So we will stick around here.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll stick around till about 7:55, and then we'll probably mute. So if there's any questions, we'll gladly take them in the chat, as Zan said. And again, if there are no questions, really appreciate you coming to this information session. Lots of great sessions tonight, and I really hope you find everything you need. If not, please do phone your local school's principal. Happy to chat and give you more details. Visiting the school is always a great idea. Thanks again, everybody. Zan, it looks like we've got one question and one hello to me. Hello. Hey, it's always great to hear and see from former folks. But there is a question, Zan. What are examples of the writing component? So what could students be expected to do in grade 9 writing?
Yeah, so students are expected to do a variety of different writing tasks. Some of them might include personal narrative. And so asking students as an example to write a memoir or to write a personal or something that's reflective and also learning a little bit about infographics. And so how do you create media text? And so that might be in the form of an infographic, as well as kind of more structured, organized writing or essays, opinion pieces as well. So those are some different examples. It really varies from classroom to classroom. And it's really featured through student interests, and then but making sure that a variety of writing tasks are provided.
There's another question, Dan. Are there different levels of English courses, such as advanced, intermediate, and beginner?
Really good question. So the OCDSB has a variety of English courses. There is a ESL program for English language learners. There's also ELD program for English literacy development, which is also focused on supporting English language learners, but also with the literacy piece. And then there are, in grade 9, there's one grade 9 English class for other students who are not ESS, and that really is focused on supporting meeting students where they are and really supporting their growth as learners. So grade 9 and 10, there are just those classes, English classes, and then in grade 11 and 12, students would decide whether or not they want to continue with college English, or if they wanted to university level English, and there for the grade 11 and 12 courses that would meet the expectations to get into those two different programs.
Hey, Zan, even though we're really 7:55, so we've got time for one more. And there's a question: will Shakespeare be taught in grade 9?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, so some teachers do teach Shakespeare and other teachers don't. It really depends on the classroom. Yeah, so the curriculum really says to cover a variety of different types of texts, and so they might cover poetry, and so some teachers are teaching Shakespeare and others are not. So it really depends on the classroom and the teacher and the responsiveness to students.
Fantastic. So thank you again for the questions. We now invite you to take the time to head to your next session, and we will turn off our cameras, and we will be back to start at 8 o'clock. So thank you so much. All right. It is 8 o'clock, And so we're going to get our information session started. I just want to pass along a huge welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for coming out to our information session and the Welcome to High School night. My name is Brendan Smith. I am a principal, a central principal, and one of my portfolios happens to be English from K to 12. And I get the opportunity to work with some great coaches who work in schools, helping and supporting all things literacy. So I've got Christine Court here tonight, and Christine is our board-based literacy coach. And the person you've come to hear tonight is Zan Woods, and Zan Woods is one of our secondary coaches. And so she's got a presentation for you tonight and possibly the opportunity to answer some questions at the end as well. So without further ado, again, thanks for coming out, and I'm going to pass it over to Zan.
Thanks so much, Brent. I'm just going to share my screen, so just give you a moment here. Okay, there we go. So welcome. To the All About High School Grade English team, as Brent mentioned, is Alexandra Woods, or Zan, and I'm a literacy instructional coach with the OCDSB for secondary. So this presentation is going to go over the course description and overall curriculum strands and expectations. I'm also going to discuss the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap and its impact on English classrooms within the OCDSB, and then provide recommendations for how to prepare your student for grade English. Yes, please feel free to pop them in the chat, and we'll try and get to the questions at the end of the presentation. So the grade 9 English course is really designed to support students to develop oral communication, so speaking and listening, prepare students for English at the grade 10, 11, and 12 levels. And you'll notice that the grade 9 English course, like other courses, has a course code. Is at the top right of the screen here. The code consists of letters and numbers, and it can be found on your student's timetable. The letters at the beginning of the course code indicate the subject, so ENG indicates the number following the letters indicates the grade. So 1 would be the first year of high school, grade 9, 2 is grade 10, 3, grade 11, etc. And then the letter at the end would indicate the level, although in 10 are there is only one level, just so that is there. Each course also has curriculum that teachers must follow in developing course content and designing instruction. And so the curriculum are really expectations that are outlined by the Ministry of Education, and all teachers must adhere to the curriculum. So each course curriculum has strands, which you'll notice are at the top row here, which are over categories that students will be exploring, and then also specific expectations beneath those categories. So for example, students are expected to learn about oral communication in grade 9, and this includes specific expectations and then also reflecting on skills and strategies. So let's take a closer look at oral communication. So by the end of the course, students are expected to listen to understand and respond in a variety of ways for a variety of purposes, to speak, to communicate, and so using speaking skills and strategies for different audiences and purposes, and then reflecting on skills and strategies. And that's really the most important one, I think, is thinking about how are they using oral communication, what are their strengths, and where is their growth over the course of this semester. So oral communication is taught and practiced through a variety of classroom activities, including listening to podcasts or oral texts, engaging in small and larger group discussions, and through presentations. And the image on the right actually is a conversation game, which was developed by a teacher in the OCDSB to engage students in an activity of accountable talk, a way to express opinions by sentence stems. And really engaging in kind of productive and active listening with their peers. The second strand in the curriculum is reading and literature studies, and this includes the overall expectations of reading for meaning, so we want students to read, we want them to demonstrate an understanding of a variety of texts, including literary, informational, and graphic texts, and to really think about how they're constructing. Also, and how a text's form and style might influence the way that it communicates. They're also expected to read with fluency. And then also that reflective piece, so reflecting on their skills and their strategies. So what are their strengths as readers? What are the areas for improvement? And what strategies did they find most useful when they were reading? So this slide shows an example of texts that students are reading right now in grade 9 classrooms. These are pictures that I asked teachers to take this fall. And you'll notice that the texts really reflect multiple identities and genres. So having texts that reflect student identity and interest is really a priority for teachers in the OCDSB. And some of the strategies that teachers are using to help students to understand these texts are things like annotating a text as they read it. Again, this is a picture from a classroom that I took last week working with a teacher, and she's asking her students to annotate texts. So to think they're doing, and then thinking about how is the text organized, was the punctuation and the word choice, and how does that impact the text as a whole. This is just one approach that many teachers are using to get students to actively reflect on a text and to really deepen their comprehension and understanding. So this third strand in the English curriculum is the writing strand. And the writing strand expectation is really that students are expected to be able to develop and organize their writing by the end of the semester, to use their knowledge of text and different stylistic elements to kind of revise their writing and to write a variety of different things like informational texts, graphic texts, narrative texts, to apply knowledge of conventions. So using editing and proofreading and all of those skills and peer editing, and then again, reflecting on their skills and strategies. So reflecting on and identifying their strengths as writers, the areas for improvement, and the strategies that found most effective in the writing process. So these pictures actually show one strategy that quite a few teachers are using to support students to develop the writing. The picture above shows a class in the OCD, and this particular peer editing protocol uses a script. And so the student has to identify what they're looking for support for, and then they read their work. But embedded in this protocol, again, are sentence stems. And so students are also learning how to give and receive feedback in an open, respectful, responsive, and active listening kind of way. The last strand in the curriculum is the media strand. And so by the end of the course, students are expected to understand a variety of media texts, to understand the forms and conventions and techniques of media texts and how they're used to create meaning. They're also expected to create some media texts, and then again, to reflect on their skills and strategies as interpreters and creators of media. So this is a photo that was taken last week in an English classroom. And this shows an example really of critical literacy, critical media literacy. So many they received within a 75-minute period. Very brave teacher. And the results were then used to discuss media consumption, impact on actions, the impact of media on actions, beliefs, and self-esteem. As you'll notice that news has 0. Nobody received a news notification within that 75-minute period. Critical thinking about what are we consuming and how is it impacting us is this was a great entry point for that. The other beautiful thing about some of the ways that teachers are engaging with critical literacy is to embed numeracy and math into English. And so really helping students to see the connections between different courses and how skills are transferable from to the next. So in addition to the curriculum, teachers in the OCDSB are really guided by the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap, and the document that guides instruction, and it was developed by the OCDSB really responsively to voices from the community and students and parents and family members. And it's based on human rights, non-discrimination, participation and inclusion, and transparency and accountability. So one of the areas of the roadmap that guides teacher instruction is the programming and support for students section. And section outlines programming goals, including the redevelopment of courses to include and represent Indigenous, Black, and minoritized histories, perspectives, and ways of knowing, and also increased representation in the curriculum. And so the Indigenous Human Rights and Equity Roadmap is really a guide for text selection and for instructional decisions and planning. And this slide shows some of the lessons and the student work that is reflective of that roadmap, all from English classes this year. So how can you prepare your child for grade 9 English? So one very important way to prepare your child is really to encourage them to read or to listen to texts daily. So 20 minutes of reading a day means exposure to 1.8 million words per year, so just 20 minutes. But it also equips students with knowledge about the world and knowledge about themselves. So the expression that books are both windows and mirrors that help students to see outside of themselves and also help them to reflect on their own evolving identities. And so reading does not always need to be in text form either. Listening to podcasts and audiobooks available. There are many online through the public library and also online for free. One of the most popular podcasts among students these days from what I've seen in the classroom is one called Serial. So feel free to look that up afterwards. To help your child prepare for high school English is really through dinner table conversations. And so the expression that reading and writing float on a sea of talk. And so we can actually support their writing by supporting their speaking. And so one of the things that I've been doing with my kids at the dinner table are using kind of sentence stems and asking them about topics of interest. So I noticed that this is because, and so when we use this language, then students and kids kind of pick up what we're saying, and then they're able to weave that into their writing and into their oral communication pieces. So dinner table conversations are a really important way of activating some of those skills that are important for grade 9 English. And then finally, studies show that writing daily, so actually putting the pen to paper, getting away from the tablet, the phone, really helps students to process concepts and to make and map meanings of words. So encouraging your child to engage in writing activities that really put the pen to paper is very useful. Some real world activities are really useful because they provide students with agency and they empower them to use literacy to change the world. And so some examples of possible acts of real world literacy, to a city councillor, an MP or an MPP, maybe sending letters to a friend who lives in another city, or one of, if you know somebody somewhere else, getting your kids to begin writing. Younger with reading and writing, or maybe buying them a journal and encouraging them to really make it their own, to document their thoughts through words and images. So that these are some other images from but that about wraps up the school English presentation. But if you have any questions and if we have some time, please feel free to post them in the chat and we'll do our best to. I see there's one there. Oh. Any questions?
Just a huge thanks there, Zan, and I'll say a huge
How are we
thanks to
doing?
everyone who's.
Okay.
Oh, was that a question?
Oh, maybe.
If you've got questions, if you
Hold on.
could put
I
them
want to
in
know
the
what the
chat,
course
and it looks like
choices.
there's one right now.
Yes. Yep. So this question is about what course choices are available in grade 11 and 12. And so in grade 9 and 10, they're taking, there's one English class for grade 9 and 10. And then in grade 11 and 12, they can choose to take a university level class to move into the university level, or they can choose to move into the college level class. There are also a variety of other classes that are offered, such in grade 12, there's a creative writing class as an example. And there's also a literacy course for students who needed support with foundational literacy skills. So those are the course options that are available in grade 11 and 12. But again, in grade 9 and 10, the classes that are offered are just the grade 9 English and grade 10 English class. So I see another question about Shakespeare. And so it's a really good question. And, you know, it really depends on the class and on the teacher and on the student's interests. Yeah. And the variety of things, informational and graphic texts. So students will definitely be engaged in a variety of texts. And again, English class. Yes, so grade 11, I didn't mention that, but the grade 11 English class is actually an NB class, which is an Indigenous studies class. So it does actually look at multimodal ways of learning. And again, it's another attempt really to decolonize education at the grade 11 level, different ways of learning. So we're really grateful to have guidance from our Indigenous education team and to provide us with guidance on supporting different ways of knowing and encouraging our students to be exposed to a variety of different literacies. So Corey, you can go online to the Ministry of Education to look for a chart, although the grade 9 as well as in Toronto are just the one English class. So the grade 11 and 12 classes will be university or college, but the grade 9 is just one English class in those. So Marwa, it's a good question. No, this is just for English. So when your child starts grade, they will receive a timetable, and they are required to take over the course of their high school career. And so grade 9, they're required to take one English class, one math class, one science class, etc. And then they have some elective classes. And so the elective classes are the ones that they can choose. And then grade 10, again, there are compulsory classes, and then there are elective classes.
Excellent.
When do they learn class questions coming up again? So again, the curriculum calls for a variety of different texts, and it really depends to the students. So students are going to learn a variety of different texts, including informational, graphic, narrative, that kind of thing. Yeah. If you do have any other questions, however, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to your school administrator if you know where your student is headed, just to get additional education and more guidance on specific courses and choices and that kind of thing. And I know they're really excited to welcome your children into the OCDSB, as are we. And I apologize for not being able to provide specific answers to some of those questions, but it really does depend on the classroom. We have the curriculum as the guide, as well as the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap. So those are the two kind of foundational documents that are really guiding the teacher choices.
All right. Again, I'm going to thank everybody. And again, I apologize for some of those folks who couldn't hear. But as Zan did say, please contact your school. You can get all these answers at your local school as well. So we're going to take a 30-second break, turn our mics off and our cameras to get ready for the next session, which is starting in about 1 minute. Have a great night, everybody. Okay, I see that it is 8:21, so we're going to get started now. I just want to pass on a huge welcome to everyone who's come out. I see we have about 24 people for this session tonight. My name is Brent Smith, and I am a central principal in programming and learning. And one of my portfolios, I'm lucky to have the portfolio of literacy from kindergarten to grade 12. So I really have just a wonderful, wonderful perspective on and get to see and learn about all sorts of wonderful opportunities for learning from kindergarten to grade 12. We've got Christine Cork here tonight. She's one of our board-based literacy coaches. And the person you've come here to hear tonight is Zan Woods. Zan is one of our secondary literacy coaches. And like all our team, we do support literacy across the board from K to 12. So great information session tonight. If you have questions, you can put them right in the chat and Zan will get to them at the very end, or one of us will get them to the very end. So without further ado, I'd like to pass the proverbial microphone on to Zan.
Thanks so much, Brent. I'm just going to share my screen, get started here. So welcome to All About High School Grade 9 English presentation. You know, you saved the best for last, I just have to say. Hopefully this will be entertaining and also informative for you, and thanks for hanging in for this last presentation. As Brent mentioned, or Zan Woods, and I am a literacy instructor with the OCDSB and specifically focused on secondary literacy. So this presentation is going to go over the course description for grade 9 English and the overall strands and expectations, touch on the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap, which is really a guiding document for many English classes and the board itself, and also touch on how to prepare your child for grade 9 English next year. So welcome. So the grade 9 English course is designed to support students to develop oral communication, so speaking and listening. So reading a variety of different texts. And you'll notice that the grade 9 English course, like other courses, has a course code, and that you can see at the top of the screen right up here. So the first 3 letters indicate the subject. And so if you're looking at your student's timetable for next year and you're not sure what the course is, a good indicator is either Googling or looking at those first 3 letters. So this indicates English. There will be a number at the first 3 letters, and that indicates what grade the course is offered in. So a 1 indicates the first year of high school, grade 9, a 2 indicates the second year of high school, grade 10, etc. And then the last letter on the end indicates the level. However, in grade 9 and 10, there is only one level of English, and that's grade 9 and 10 English. And each course also has curriculum expectations that teachers must adhere to when developing course content and also designing instruction. So these are the expectations that are outlined by the Ministry of Education, and so we have to adhere to these expectations for grade 9 English across Ontario. So each up here, so the 4 strands in English are oral communication, reading and literature studies, writing and media, and then beneath the strands, you'll see specific expectations. So the specific expectations tell teachers and students and parents and family members and caregivers what exactly students need to be able to do by the end of the year under that umbrella of the curriculum. So let's take a closer look at the oral communication strands. That's that first one. So by the end of the course, the grade 9 English course, students are expected to listen to understand and to appropriate ways for a variety of purposes, to speak, to communicate, using speaking skills and strategies appropriate to communicate in a variety of different situations for different audiences, and for their skills and strategies. And that to me is the most important one, students reflecting on their growth, identifying their strengths as listeners and as speakers, and then thinking about what areas they need to work on to improve. And then also, what strategies work well for them when they're communicating it for different audiences or purposes. So I wanted to provide some examples of oral communication activities or tasks that teachers are using right now in grade 9 classrooms. And it's taught and practiced through a variety of different activities. So turn and talk, small group discussion, whole class discussion. But the image right here is actually OCDSB teacher developed, cut up and color coded. They're given an opinion prompt, and then students have to choose one of these little sentence stems and have to express what it says, use that sentence stem in order to express their opinion on the prompt. So what's interesting is sometimes they end up having to agree or disagree with something that maybe is opposite. It really teaches students how to use language to speak and listen actively and engage in conversations with their peers. So the second strand of the curriculum, literature studies, and so for this strand, students are expected to read for meaning. So reading and understanding a variety of different texts, so literary texts, informational texts, and using a wide range of strategies to understand those texts to construct meaning. They also are expected to understand how texts, the form and the style and the organization of the text might impact its meaning. They're also expected to read it. And then again, that big one is reflecting on their skills and strategies. So what are their strengths as readers? What are the areas for improvement? And what strategies did they find most useful when they were reading in order to understand text? So here are some texts that students are actually reading right now in grade 9 classrooms in the OCDSB. And you'll notice really that the texts reflect multiple identities. And that having text that reflects the identity and interest is really a priority for teachers in the OCDSB. So yeah, a variety of texts there. One of the ways that teachers help students to understand those texts is through different ways of comprehending. And one of those ways is annotating a text. And so this is a strategy teachers are using in order to support students to understand the meaning of a text, to make text to self connections. So this is a picture from a teacher's classroom that I took last week, where this teacher is going over what the annotation process is and asking your students to notice things about how the text is, and then to reflect by annotating the text itself. The third strand in the English curriculum is writing. So writing includes developing and organizing content, so they're writing. So how are we generating, gathering, and organizing ideas, and writing a variety of different things for a variety of different purposes and audiences. Using knowledge of form and style. So thinking about what they've read, okay, now what do I need to do with that information in order to make sure that my writing is meeting a purpose and style in order to write for a specific audience and purpose. Applying knowledge of conventions, so using editing, proofreading, and publishing skills and strategies. And then again, reflecting on skills and strategies as writers. So what am I doing really well? Like, where can I improve? And what are the strategies that really help me as a writer? So I wanted to, again, provide an example of one of the ways that teachers are teaching writing in the OCDSB. And this is a class who are engaging in something called the feedback protocol. So this protocol actually uses a script. It asks students to identify what they're with as a writer, their writing dilemma, and then to share their work in a group discussion. They receive warm feedback and then cool feedback, and then they go back and they make changes to their work based on what their peers have given them in terms of feedback. But the student is for determining which feedback they're going to take, which feedback they're going to leave. So it's a very empowering peer editing process. And it also teaches students how to give and receive feedback, because embedded in this process are sentence stems. And sometimes what I've noticed, students sometimes feel more reluctant to give feedback than they do to receive feedback. So it also teaches those skills of the oral communication skills in addition to the peer editing skills. The fourth and final strand in the English curriculum is the media strand. And so the media strand includes understanding media texts, understanding different forms and conventions and texts, to create media texts. The actual creation of media text, so students are engaged in creating their own media texts for a variety of different audiences and purposes, and then again reflecting on their skills. So how are they thinking critically about media, about their consumption, their interpretation, and their creation of media. So again, another example of something a teacher's doing right now. This is actually last week in a classroom. She's beginning a unit on media, and this really shows an example of critical literacy. So this brave teacher asked her students to turn on all of their notifications for a 75-minute period, notifications that they received. And the results were then used to discuss media consumption and the impact on actions, beliefs, and also self-esteem. And so it was really interesting jumping off point for a conversation, especially around the news. There were 0 notifications for news, many for Instagram, Snapchat. Yeah, so just thinking a little bit about those pieces. But the other beautiful piece of this example, very reflective of many English classrooms, is the cross-curricular nature of this exploration of media. So really it embeds numeracy and mathematical thinking in addition to English and critical thinking. And this is an example of something that you'll see across English classrooms, teachers working with teachers to really think about how are the skills transferable. And critical thinking is something that exists within all disciplines, and that can be carried over from subject to subject. So in addition to the curriculum, one of the other guiding documents for English classrooms is the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap. So the practice and content is really guided by a document that's based on human rights, non-discrimination, participation, inclusion, and transparency and accountability. And actually it was created based on and students. And so really this is about student voice and how we bring it into the classroom. So one of the areas of the roadmap that guides teacher instruction is the programming and support students section. And so this section outlines programming goals, including the redevelopment of courses to include and represent Indigenous, Black, and minoritized histories, perspectives, and ways of knowing, and increased representation in the curriculum. And so the map actually really guides text selection, instructional decisions, and planning. And this slide shows some of the lessons and student work that really reflect the roadmap. So how can you prepare your child for grade 9 English? This is a really good question. So one of the most important things you can do is to encourage daily. So 20 minutes of reading a day means exposure to 1.8 million words per year. So just 20 minutes. And but in addition to kind of expanding vocabulary and fluency and all those pieces, it helps. So books are both those windows to other worlds and mirrors where students can really reflect on their own evolving identities. And so if students are feeling intimidated by reading a physical text every day, they can always listen to podcasts and audiobooks, because those are also very useful and many easily accessible for free through the public library and also through podcast applications. A second thing that you can do if, to support and prepare your student for grade 9 English is really through those dinner table conversations. So this that reading and writing can 4-year-old. So at the dinner table, thinking about a topic that interests them and then trying to model some ways of speaking, some sentences that actually translate directly. So in my opinion, this is because ... And once, having those dinner table conversations and when students are exposed to sort of speaking and those sentence stems, then often they start to be embedded writing as well. So dinner table conversations are very useful for supporting students with literacy. And finally, study daily writing, which is actually the pen to the paper, and getting the laptop and phone and tablet away and just getting the pen down to the paper really helps students to process concepts and to make and map meanings. Encouraging your child to engage in writing activities and put that pen to paper really important. And so maybe a motivation for this could be to engage them in real world acts of literacy, really where they're impacted to use literacy to change somebody, counselor, MPP or MP, sending letters to a friend, or supporting younger siblings with reading and writing. Another way to support daily writing is to buy them a journal or get them to choose a journal, even better, and really encourage them to make it their own and document their thoughts through words and images. So that daily active writing has a huge impact on supporting students to feel comfortable and confident in grade 9. So these are some other images from classrooms, but that about wraps up the All About High School English. I think we probably have a question. Please feel free to pop it into the chat. And otherwise, have a fantastic night, and we look forward to welcoming your children in September.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zan, and thanks to everyone who came out to this info session tonight. If you do have questions and didn't have the opportunity to ask tonight, the best questions are always the ones you think of after the presentation is over. Please don't hesitate to contact your child's new school. The administration and teachers at your secondary school, your local secondary school, would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. So we'll hang out for about 1 minute. Oh, it looks like there might be a question there, Zan. This is for online school. This session applies to both online school and in-person school. So any of the details or anything Zan talked about tonight apply equally at both. All right. So for those people who are still here, we're going to, I do see one more question. It looks like it's popped in. Okay, thank you. Just to thank you. Well, thanks for asking the question. I really appreciate it. So we're going to turn mics and cameras off. But again, I believe the vendors, there's a vendor section tonight that will be open for the next 20 minutes as well. So you're more than welcome to head over there. Really just thank you again for coming out tonight to the information night. And as I said, always great to be able to contact your local school. They'll be happy to answer any questions that you do have. So again, thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Take care.